This is BBC Radio 4, where now there's another chance to hear Jeeves in Manhattan from the Cheltenham Festival. Martin Jarvis was invited to perform two of P.G. Wodehouse's celebrated New York stories. Radio 4 was there to record the event. In the first programme, he performs The Artistic Career of Corky in front of a packed house at the Everyman Theatre.
Notice, as I breathe through these reminiscences of mine, that the scene of action is laid in and around the city of New York. What, you may ask yourselves, is Bertram doing so far from his beloved native land? Well, what happened was that my Aunt Agatha had sent me over to America to try to disentangle my cousin Gussie from the clutches of a girl on the music hall stage. When I tell you that by the time I'd finished my operations, Gussie had not only married the girl, but gone on the halls himself, and was doing well, you'll understand that relations were a trifle strained between aunt and nephew. So I decided it would be a sound scheme to stop on in New York for a bit, instead of going back and having long, cosy chats with her about the affair. I sent Jeeves out to find a decent apartment and settle down for a spell of exile. I'm bound to say New York is the most sprightly place to be exiled in. Blokes introduced me to other blokes, and it wasn't long before I knew squads of the right sort, some who rolled in the stuff in houses up by Central Park, and others who lived with the gas turned down, mostly around Washington Square, artists and writers and so forth. Bruce Corcoran, known as Corky, was one of the artists. A portrait painter, he called himself, but as a matter of fact, his score up to date had been nil. You see, the catch about portrait painting is that you can't start painting portraits till people come along and ask you to. Now, this makes it kind of difficult. Corky managed to get along by drawing an occasional picture for the comic papers. He had rather a gift for funny stuff and for doing bedsteads and chairs and things for the advertisements. His principal source of income, however, was derived from biting the ear of a rich uncle, one Alexander Worple, who was in the jute business. I'm a bit foggy as to what jute is, but nevertheless, Mr. Worple had made a quite indecently large stack out of it. Corky's uncle was a robust sort of cove who looked like living forever. Seemed as if he might go to par. But what Corky really kicked at was that Worple didn't want him to be an artist. He didn't think he had any talent in that direction, always urging him to go into the jute business and start at the bottom and work his way up. And what Corky said was that while he didn't know what they did at the bottom of a jute business, instinct told him that it was something too beastly for words. Moreover, Corky believed that someday he was going to make a hit as an artist. Meanwhile, he was somehow inducing his uncle to cough up, very grudgingly, a small quarterly allowance. He wouldn't even have got this if his uncle hadn't had a hobby. Mr. Worple, in his spare time, was what is known as an ornithologist. He'd written a book called American Birds and was writing another to be called More American Birds. And when he'd finished that, the presumption was that he would begin a third and keep on till the supply of American birds gave out. Corky used to go to him about once every 3 months and let him talk about American birds. Apparently these little chats made Corky's allowance all right for the time being. The other thing, this Worple was a man of extremely uncertain temper, and his general tendency was to think that whatever step Corky took in any direction on his own account was just another proof of his innate idiocy. I should imagine Jeeves feels very much the same about me. So, when Corky trickled into my apartment one afternoon, shooing a girl in front of him, and said, "Bertie, I want you to meet my fiancée, Miss Singer," the very first words I spoke were, "Corky, how about your uncle?" Well, the poor chap gave one of those mirthless laughs, and the girl said, "We're so scared, Mr. Wooster. We were hoping that you might suggest a way of breaking it to him." Muriel Singer was one of those very quiet, appealing girls who have a way of looking at you with their big eyes as if they thought you were the greatest thing on earth and wondered that you hadn't got onto it yet yourself. She gave a fellow a protective kind of feeling. Look, I don't see why your uncle shouldn't be most awfully bucked, I said to Corky. He will think Miss Singer the ideal wife for you. Well, you don't know him, Bertie. Even if he did like Muriel, he wouldn't admit it. That's the sort of pig-headed ass he is. I strained the old bean to meet this emergency. Corky, you want to work it so that he makes Miss Singer's acquaintance without knowing that you know her. And then you come along. Oh, but how can I work it that way? There's only one thing to do, I said. Well, what's that? Leave it to Jeeves. And I rang the bell.
Sir?
Said Jeeves, kind of manifesting himself. One of the rummy things about Jeeves is that you very seldom see him come into a room. He's like one of those weird chappies in India who dissolve themselves into thin air and nip through space in a sort of disembodied way and assemble the parts again just where they want them. I've got a cousin who's what they call a theosophist, and he says he's often nearly worked the thing himself, but couldn't quite bring it off, probably owing to having fed in his boyhood on the flesh of animals slain in anger. Jeeves, I said, we want your advice.
Very good, sir.
I boiled down Corky's painful case into a few well-chosen words. Jeeves, we want you to suggest some way by which Mr. Worple can make Miss Singer's acquaintance without getting onto the fact that Mr. Corcoran already knows her. Understand?
I have thought of something already, sir.
You have?
Yes, sir, but it requires a certain financial outlay.
Ah, I was still under the influence of the girl's melting gaze. No, you can count on me for all that sort of thing, Corky, I said. Carry on, Jeeves.
I would suggest, sir, that Mr. Corcoran take advantage of Mr. Worple's attachment to ornithology.
Oh, good Lord. Well?
Well, sir, why should not the young lady write a small volume to be entitled, let us say, The Children's Book of American Birds, and dedicate it to Mr. Worple? A limited edition could be published at your expense, sir, and a great deal of the book would, of course, be given over to eulogistic remarks concerning Mr. Worple's own larger treatise on the same subject. I should recommend the dispatching of a presentation copy to Mr. Worple immediately on publication, accompanied by a letter in which the young lady asks to be allowed to make the acquaintance of one to whom she owes so much. This would, I fancy, produce the desired result.
Jeeves, that is absolutely ripping.
Thank you, sir.
The girl made an objection. But I'm sure I couldn't write a book about anything. I can't even write good letters. Corky chipped in. Muriel's talents lie more in the direction of the drama, Bertie. Muriel is in the chorus of that show, Choose Your Exit, at the Manhattan. It's unreasonable, but we both feel that that fact might increase Uncle Alexander's natural tendency to kick like a steer. I saw what he meant, but Jeeves had a solution, of course.
I fancy it would be a simple matter, sir, to find some impecunious author who would be glad to do the actual composition of the volume for a small fee. It is only necessary that the young lady's name should appear on the title page.
Yeah, that's true, said Corky. Sam Patterson would do it for $100. I'll get after him right away. Fine.
Will that be all, sir? Very good, sir. Thank you, sir.
And what do you know? In due season, a topping, shiny book came along. I happened to be down at Corky's place when the first copies of the Children's Book of American Birds bobbed up. Well, it was certainly some book. It had a red cover with a fowl of some species on it. And underneath, the girl's name in gold letters. I opened a copy at random. Often of a spring morning, it said at the top of page 21, as you wander through the fields, you will hear the sweet-toned, carelessly flowing warble of the purple finch linnet. When you were older, you must read all about him in Mr. Alexander Worple's wonderful book, American Birds. You see, a boost for the uncle right away. And only a few pages later, there he was in the limelight again, in connection with the yellow-billed cuckoo. The more I read, the more I admired Jeeves's genius in putting us on to the wheeze. I didn't see how the uncle could fail to drop. I mean, you can't call a chap the world's greatest authority on the yellow-billed cuckoo without rousing a certain disposition towards chumminess in him. It's a cert, I said. An absolute cinch, said Corky. And a day or two later, he meandered up Park Avenue to tell me that all was well. The uncle had written Muriel a letter so dripping with the milk of human kindness that if he hadn't known Mr. Worple's handwriting, Corky would have refused to believe him the author of it. Any time it suited Miss Singer to call, said the uncle, he would be delighted to make her acquaintance. Shortly after this, I was out of town for a few months, and my first evening back in New York, happening to pop into a quiet sort of little restaurant, I found Muriel Singer there, sitting by herself at a table near the door. Corky, I took it, was out telephoning. I went up and passed the time of day. Well, well, well. What? I said. Why, Mr. Wooster, how do you do? Corky around? I beg your pardon? Oh, you're waiting for Corky, aren't you? Oh, no. I'm not waiting for him. It seemed to me that there was a sort of something in her voice. A kind of thingamy. I say, you haven't had a row with Corky, have you? I mean, I thought you usually dined with him before you went to the theatre. I've left the stage now. Suddenly the whole thing dawned on me. Well, of course, I see now. You're married. Yes. Well, how perfectly topping. I wish you all kinds of happiness. Thank you so much. Oh, Alexander, this is a friend of mine, Mr. Wooster. I spun round. A bloke with a lot of stiff grey hair and a red sort of face was standing there. Rather a formidable Johnny he looked. I want you to meet my husband, Mr. Wooster. Mr. Wooster is a friend of Bruce's, Alexander. The old boy grasped my hand warmly, and that was all that kept me from hitting the floor in a heap. The place was rocking. Absolutely.
So you know my nephew, Mr. Wooster.
I heard him say.
I wish you would try to knock a little sense into him, make him quit this playing at painting. But I have an idea that he is steadying down. I noticed it first that night he came to dinner with us, my dear, to be introduced to you. Something seemed to have sobered him. Perhaps you will give us the pleasure of your company tonight, Mr. Wooster. Or have you dined?
I said I had. What I needed was air, not dinner. When I reached the apartment, I said, Jeeves, a stiff B&S first, and then I've a bit of news for you. He came back with a tray and a long glass. Better have one yourself, Jeeves. You'll need it.
Later on, perhaps. Thank you, sir.
Well, all right, please yourself, but you're going to get a shock. You remember my friend, Mr. Corcoran?
Yes, sir.
And the girl who was to slide gracefully into his uncle's esteem by writing the book on birds?
Perfectly, sir.
Well, she's slid. She's married the uncle. He took it without blinking. You can't rattle Jeeves.
That was always a development to be feared, sir.
Well, you don't mean to tell me that you were expecting it?
It crossed my mind as a possibility.
Oh, did it, by Jove? Well, I think you might have warned us.
I hardly liked to take the liberty, sir.
Of course, I couldn't have foreseen that the scheme would skid into the ditch as it had done, but all the same, I didn't relish the idea of meeting Corky again until Time, the great healer, had been able to get in a bit of soothing work. I cut Washington Square out absolutely for the next few months. And then, just when I was beginning to think I might safely pop down in that direction, Time, instead of working the healing wheeze, went and put the lid on it. Opening the paper one morning, I read that Mrs. Alexander Worple had presented her husband with a son and heir. Well, I was so dashed sorry for poor old Corky that I hadn't the heart to touch my breakfast. I wanted, of course, to rush down to Washington Square and grip the poor blighter silently by the hand. And then, thinking it over, I hadn't the nerve. absent treatment seemed the touch. I gave it him in waves. But after a month or so, I began to hesitate again, and in the end, I bounded all out for the studio, and there was Corky, hunched up at the easel, painting away, while on the model throne sat a severe-looking female of middle age, holding a baby. A fellow has to be ready for that sort of thing. Oh, yeah, I said, and started to back out. Corky looked over his shoulder. Oh, hello, Bertie. Don't go. We're just finishing for the day. That will be all this afternoon, he said to the nurse, who got up with the baby and decanted it into a perambulator, which was standing in the fairway. As soon as they'd trundled off, Corky turned to me and began to get it off his chest. It's my uncle's idea. Muriel doesn't know about it yet. The portrait's to be a surprise for her on her birthday. The nurse takes the kid out ostensibly to get a breather, and they beat it down here, Bertie. Get acquainted with this. Here's the first commission I have ever had to paint a portrait, and the sitter is that human poached egg that has butted in and bounced me out of my inheritance. Can you beat it? To expect me to spend my afternoons gazing into the ugly face of a little brat who, to all intents and purposes, has swiped all I possess. I can't refuse to paint the portrait because if I did, my uncle would stop my allowance. Yet every time I look up and catch that kid's vacant eye, I tell you, Bertie, sometimes when he gives me a patronizing glance and then turns away and is sick as if it revolted him to look at me, I can almost see the headlines. Promising young artist beans baby with axe. I patted his shoulder silently. I kept away from the studio for some time after that, but one afternoon Corky called me on the phone. Bertie, you couldn't come down here this afternoon, could you? All right, what's the trouble? Anything up? I finished the portrait. Oh, good boy. Stout work. Well, the fact is, Bertie, it doesn't look quite right to me. There's something about it. My uncle's coming in half an hour to inspect it, and I don't know why it is, but I kind of feel I'd like your moral support. What, you think he'll cut up rough? He may. Right, I'll come. But only if I may bring Jeeves. Jeeves? Why Jeeves? Jeeves is the fool who suggested the scheme that KO'd. Listen, Corky old top, if you think I'm going to face that uncle of yours without Jeeves's support, you're mistaken. I'd sooner go into a den of wild beasts and bite a lion on the back of the neck. Oh, all right, said Corky. I rang for Jeeves and explained the situation.
Very good, sir,
said Jeeves. We found Corky near the door, looking at the picture with one hand up in a defensive sort of way, as if he thought it might swing on him. Stand right where you are, Bertie, he said, without moving. Now, tell me honestly, how does it strike you? The light from the big window fell right on the picture. I took a good look at it. Then I shifted a bit nearer and took another look. Then I went back to where I'd been at first because it hadn't seemed quite so bad from there. Well, said Corky anxiously. I hesitated a bit. Well, of course, old man, I only saw the kid once, but it was an ugly sort of kid, wasn't it, if I remember rightly? As ugly as that? I looked again, and honesty compelled me to be frank. Well, I don't see how it could have been, old chap. Poor old Corky groaned. You're quite right, Bertie. Something's gone wrong with the darn thing. My private impression is that without knowing it, I've worked that stunt that Sargent used to pull, painting the soul of the sitter. I've got through the mere outward appearance and have put the child's soul on canvas. But could a child of that age have a soul like that? I don't see how he could have managed it in the time. What do you think, Jeeves?
I doubt it, sir.
It sort of leers at you, doesn't it? You've noticed that too, said Corky. Well, I don't see how one could help noticing. Bertie, all I tried to do was to give the little brute a cheerful expression, but he looks positively dissipated. Yeah, well, just what I was going to suggest, old man. He looks as if he were in the middle of a colossal spree and enjoying every minute of it. Don't you think so, Jeeves?
He has a decidedly inebriated air, sir.
Corky was starting to say something when the door opened and the uncle came in. For about 3 seconds, all was joy, jollity, and goodwill. Jeeves had projected himself into the background and he didn't notice him.
Well, Bruce, my boy, so the portrait is really finished, is it? Well, bring it out. Let's have a look at it. This will be a wonderful surprise for your aunt. Where is it? Let's...
And then he got it. Suddenly, when he wasn't set for the punch, and he rocked back on his heels. He exclaimed.
Is this a practical joke?
He said at last. You want to stand a bit further away from it, I said.
You're perfectly right. I do want to stand a bit further away from it. I want to stand so far away from it that I can't see the thing with a telescope.
He turned on Corky.
And this is what you have been wasting your time and my money on for all these years. A painter. I wouldn't let you paint a house of mine. I gave you this commission thinking that you were a competent worker. And this extract from a comic supplement is the result.
He swung towards the door, growling to himself.
This ends it. Unless you report at my office on Monday morning, prepared to abandon all this idiocy and start in at the bottom of the business to work your way up, as you should have done half a dozen years ago. Not another cent. Not another cent. Not a yapoosh.
Then the door closed and he was no longer with us. And I crawled out of the bomb-proof shelter. Corky, old top. Corky was standing staring at the picture. There was a hunted look in his eye. Well, that finishes it. What are you going to do? Do? What can I do? I can't stick on here if he cuts off supplies. I shall have to go to the office on Monday. I couldn't think of a thing to say. And then a soothing voice broke the silence.
If I might make a suggestion, sir?
It was Jeeves. He had slid from the shadows and was gazing gravely at the picture.
I wonder if I have ever happened to mention to you, sir, a Mr. Digby Thistleton, with whom I was once in service. He was a financier. He is now Lord Bridgeworth. It was a favourite saying of his that there is always a way. The first time I heard him use the expression was after the failure of a patent depilatory which he had promoted.
Jeeves, what on earth are you talking about?
I mentioned Mr. Thistleton, sir, because his was in some respects a parallel case to the present one. His depilatory failed, but he did not despair. He put it on the market again under the name of Hair-O, guaranteed to produce a full crop of hair in a few months. It was advertised, if you remember, sir, by a humorous picture of a billiard ball before and after taking, and made such a substantial fortune that Mr. Thistleton was soon afterwards elevated to the peerage for services to his party. It seems to me that if Mr. Corcoran looks into the matter, he will find, like Mr. Thistleton, that there is always a way.
What?
Mr. Worple himself suggested the solution, sir. In the heat of the moment, he compared the portrait to an extract from a coloured comic supplement. Mr. Corcoran's portrait may not have pleased Mr. Worple as a likeness of his only child, but I have no doubt that editors would gladly consider it as a foundation for a series of humorous drawings. If Mr. Corcoran will allow me to make the suggestion, his talent has always been for the humorous. There is something about this picture, something bold and vigorous, which arrests the attention. I feel sure it would be highly popular.
Corky was glaring at the picture and making a sort of dry sucking noise with his mouth. And then suddenly he began to laugh in a wild way and stagger about all over the floor. He's right. Jeeves, you're a lifesaver. You've hit on the greatest idea of the age. Start at the bottom of the business. I'll buy the business if I feel like it. I know the man who runs the comics section of the Sunday Star. He was telling me only the other day how hard it is to get a good news series. He'll give me anything I ask for a real winner like this. Yeah, I got an income for life. Hey, lend me a $5, Bertie. I want to take a taxi down to Park Row.
Jeeves smiled paternally. Or rather, he had a kind of paternal muscular spasm about the mouth, which is the nearest he ever gets to smiling. If I might make the suggestion, Mr. Corcoran, for a title of the series which you have in mind, The Adventures of Baby Blobs.
Corky and I looked at the picture, and then at each other, in an awed way. Jeeves was right. There could be no other title. Jeeves, I said. It was a few weeks later, and I had just finished looking at the comic section of the Sunday Star. Jeeves, I'm an optimist. I always have been. The older I get, the more I agree with Shakespeare and those poet Johnnies about it always being darkest before the dawn, and there's a silver lining, and what you lose on the swings you make up on the roundabouts. I mean, look at Mr. Corcoran. There was a fellow, one would have said, clear up to the eyebrows in the soup, yet look at him now. I say, have you seen these pictures?
Extremely diverting, sir.
They've made a big hit, you know.
I anticipated it, sir.
I leaned back against the pillows. You know, Jeeves, you're a genius. You ought to be drawing a commission on these things.
I have nothing to complain of in that respect, sir. Mr. Corcoran has been most generous. I am putting out the brown suit, sir.
No, I think I'll wear the blue with the faint red stripe.
Not the blue with the faint red stripe, sir.
I rather fancy myself in it.
Not the blue with the faint red stripe, sir.
Oh, all right. Have it your own way.
Very good, sir. Thank you, sir.